our great problem, our great cardinal sin is what happens to people with low education here. They're far less likely to work. The worklessness rates are far worse than America. We tend to put them on welfare and forget about them. We tend to shovel them off to edge of city estates. And so we need to be more egalitarian there.
The Prime Minister's on a tour of the country to talk about the cost of living. But is the reason we feel like we've got less money in our pockets more fundamental than subscriptions we've forgotten to cancel? New data analysis comparing wages in the UK and the US shows American workers who are functionally the irony of not being able to say this word, functionally illiterate, now earn about the same per hour as the average British worker. So what does it say about our economy? Times columnist Fraser Nelson believes this tells us more about America than Europe, and he's in the studio. Good morning, Fraser.
Good morning.
Explain that for us. What happens then when you compare the wages of the average UK worker to the average person in the US?
Well, first of all, America's a far richer country. The wages there are about 30% higher than they are here. It used to be 10% 20 years ago. That gap's only going to get bigger. America's very tech-orientated. Your average American journalist gets about twice what Brits do. In film and TV, in retail, 90% more. So the salaries in certain sectors are just far bigger in general. It's usually better to be poorer in a rich country than middling in a poorer country. But then when you look at what happens to the low education Americans, they're far more likely to be in good jobs. They're far more likely to be in the top 10% of earners. In the UK, we've got a very rigid system where the link between how you do well at school and what you earn is very, very tight. In America, it's far less tight. So something like 25% of the lowest education Americans are in the top 50% of earners. For the UK, it's about half that. So America is probably the best place in the world to be ambitious, hardworking and uneducated.
So how can we emulate some of that structure and strategy and culture here in the UK?
Well, our great problem, our great cardinal sin is what happens to people with low education here. They're far less likely to work. The worklessness rates are far worse than America. We tend to put them on welfare and forget about them. We tend to shovel them off to edge of city estates. And so we need to be more egalitarian there. But, if we look at the sheer amount of regulation, hiring British workers, the national insurance, wages here have been stagnant for a long, long time. And that isn't... So this is Andy Burnham's problem. He's talking about the cost of living. Of course, he's going to hear that some people haven't had a pay rise for something like 20 years. The average salary is still worse than it was before the crash. But this isn't something which you can change with a budget. It needs structural reform, and right now we need a productivity improvement, we need less red tape, but these are things which are very long term.
Is there a more fundamental issue, Fraser? I was thinking, listening to you there, is that in America they have a manufacturing industry. We don't really have a manufacturing industry in this country. They have low energy prices, so they can manufacture things more cheaply. So if you haven't been educated to a particular degree, there's a chance, there's a place where you can go and work highly respected manual work that can pay you well. So the structural change at stake would be being a country that's not purely service-based, which is what we are effectively, versus America, which has the whole swathe of kind of professional opportunity. This
is why this is such an important argument. I mean, because, Andy Burnham, again, he's holding a hard hat saying, I think we should pay as much as our graduates cap. Well, if he means that, then let's have more manufacturing jobs. And the biggest restraint on manufacturing is the high energy prices. We've got the highest pretty much in the developed world. Now, for as long as that's going to go on, we're always going to have a break on our manufacturing and what we can do. In America, you've got Tesla factory workers that become millionaires. So with the space exploitation, and that sort of thing is... It's not commonplace in America, but very seldom do you hear about a British factory worker becoming a millionaire because his boss floated the company. Yeah. I mean, Elon Musk is actually coming up with a complete revolution in manufacturing. But if you look at the way that Musk operates, he entrusts your average factory worker to overrule any regulations they think are stupid, to apply their judgment. He treats them as skilled workers. Here, we adopt the Japanese model. Your little robots, here are your instructions, you got to obey them. So it's not just the fact that manufacturing is cheaper in America. Your average American worker is trusted a lot more to use their judgments.
It's actually a kind of a very big cultural difference. And Americans, I feel, are much more driven towards the pursuit of wealth than maybe we are here in the UK?
Well, there's an American dream which people pursue, and to be honest, they're more likely to achieve it there. I mean, let's remember Americans work a lot more hours. So when you look at these wage comparisons, you need to work out that the average American gets far less holiday than we do.
Like 2 weeks of holiday in many cases.
It's pretty grim, and the health coverage, and there's all sorts of reasons why you need to be careful with these comparisons. But overall, America's got far more of its workplace in the higher productivity, higher growth jobs. For example, during lockdown, we had bailing companies out left, right and centre. That impeded economic renewal. America did a lot less than that. So America's got a lot more of its economy now linked. Now Americans now see us, as we used to see India, as being a country of high-skilled, quite cheap people. So we are now doing jobs for American companies because we're just so cheap. The American tech companies love coming here because you can pick up a top PhD Cambridge grad for the price of a Stanford dropout. So we're now seeing these differentials work in our favour in a way because we are now America's cheap intellectual workhouse.
I mean, Cambridge isn't what it was, as we've learned over the last couple of weeks, of course. There's more of a safety net here. How much does that pay into this? In America, self-reliance is sort of an Emersonian idea that's sort of hardwired into the country, that you earn your money, you pay your health care, and you kind of have to look after yourself. We believe, and this is true of European countries generally, I think, we believe that the state, the larger state, has a role, and therefore a lot of what we create is to provide the structure, the exoskeleton of the state. In America, they're less interested in that.
Yes, and we like to tell ourselves what a far more egalitarian country we are, but if you really look at the inequalities in Britain, they are absolutely shocking. The inequalities within cities. You actually get some worse inequalities in British cities than you do in American cities. Americans do have Medicare for the poorest student. If they're not left to the street to perish. I mean, so I think that in Britain, we've got the welfare state, which we tell ourselves makes us a much more egalitarian society. And we're very quick to criticise America for their poverty, for their trailer parks, etc. We're not very good at looking at what's going wrong in our own countries, and that's something which at times is going to be doing a lot more of for the rest of this year.
Something that might be going wrong, the structure of education and higher education with universities. I mean, there's so many different examples. The challenges you've talked about, sort of worklessness, but the challenges for graduates to get jobs, the amount of debt they're in, universities actually having a funding crisis. We were looking yesterday, they're having fewer international students. They pay £70,000 maybe a year for fees. A British student pays £10,000 just shy of. So universities are lowering the grade thresholds to bring in students. Has that sort of system of the last, 50 years ago, started to crumble in 2026?
I think it has, Rosie. I mean, this week we're going to get A-level results. A lot of kids are going to find out if they're going to go to university and which ones, but a lot of them had better not look at the graduate premiums, what they're going to get in exchange for all of that debt. Something like 2 in 5 undergraduates would be financially better off had they never gone to university. That's how bad it's becoming. Sure, there's a premium for STEM subjects, for perhaps economics, but when it comes to arts graduates like me, the history graduates like me, the outcome is pretty bad. Now, I think it's very difficult right now for kids to know this before they apply to university, and schools quite often will push them that direction because the schools are judged on how many kids they get to uni. But if the kids, I think they should be given a lot closer access, seeing that to information that shows them what's their particular degree, because the government does hold this information. If you do, I don't know, history at Loughborough University, what are you going to earn in year 1, in year 3, in year 5 after graduation?
But is that the point? I do understand this argument, and I think we're going to have a revolution in tertiary education because the model clearly doesn't work. But the conversation is all about jobs. It's this sort of grad-grinding utilitarian argument and actually, and maybe we can't afford this anymore. Maybe you just say this is hopelessly naive as an arts graduate. Surely education for itself, education for the pleasure of learning critical thinking, learning how to read and respond, all of that stuff, now gets just pushed away. Unless you're doing economics because you can have a job in a management consultant in 10 years, no one cares about it anymore.
Yeah, and that's the argument which is always deployed in defence of arts degrees. And by the way, I completely agree. I mean, you should be learning for the sake of it. It's great fun to learn. I loved studying Sovietology. It didn't do me much good in the real world, but it was great fun.
Do well in this company.
But the point is that I think the kids should know in advance, so they can decide. Because a lot of them are told, a graduate earns 100 grand more over a lifetime than a non-graduate. Now that's a very deceptive figure, because it lumps together the medicine, the engineering graduates with the arts graduates. They should be told what the people from their particular course will earn in year 3 and year 5. Then they can decide if they really want to borrow 40, 50 or 60 grand, where an apprenticeship you can be earning from day one if you want. I think there needs to be a revolution in the information available to kids so they can make these kind of choices, because salaries in a pretty bad place in Britain have been for a long time, and they are going to be for the foreseeable.
Fraser, thank you very much. Fraser Nelson, the Times columnist. And if you are a university student or the parent of a university student who maybe is just about to find out on Thursday if they're going to go and do their history degree, then I hope that wasn't too much of a tough listen.
It is. My daughter's 17, so she's doing it next year, and it's very hard to work out what to advise them. I mean, I think it's okay to say that. It's who knows what will happen in the future, but Fraser Nelson has a better idea than most people.